Cool. So we're just about to start off with what actor motion looks like. The main proponents of realizing what actor motions are, that you'll directly see that this house as X will perform a certain duty. A bit of caveat before we engage with what this house as an actor debate looks like. There are a lot of debates that say that this house, this house believes that X should do this. Look at the two examples that I've put up. This house believes that USA should invade Syria. And the other example says that this house, as the USA, would aggressively pursue regime change in Iran. Note that both these two debates are significantly different if we understand them on a very nuanced level. But as I have said earlier, and as I'll say continuously throughout the session, a lot of adjudicators don't understand the difference when framing motions or when picking up these motions. So it might the lines between these two things will blur. But for you to be very aware of in what debates, what do you have to like expect from the teams, this is something that is going to help. Cool. Because in the this house believes that USA should invade Syria debate, USA is not the actor, it's just a stakeholder, which means that in the first motion, this motion could also be debated in a world as a fictional body such as United Nations, which is now debating should USA invade Syria or not. It could be any fictional hyper powerful body which can take decisions or which is contemplating the decisions of USA to invade Syria, which at no point means that this is an actor debate. But to a certain extent, you can go ahead to make it an actor debate. It's up to you. But specifically, in a debate of this house, as USA will aggressively pursue regime change in Iran, you are acting as USA, and the unique difference I'll explain where does it lie. Because in actor debate motion, you'll realize that there is a selfish angle that exists. Selfish angle, which means that now the argumentations that you're going to make is going to be on the knowledge, interests, and restrictions of the United States of America, not as UN or as a third fictitious body. Note this difference because your argumentations should fulfill whatever US immediately knows, whatever US's foreign policy is, whatever US's individual foreign policy need and domestic politics need is. You should understand what are the restrictions of US, what areas US cannot ever invade. You cannot like say ki, look, US will invade China randomly. Like I mean like that's not how this debate will work out because it's something that US has to control upon because to a certain extent there are certain repercussions that will cost USA economically far more than merely like engaging in a war activity. So does this distinction become clear so far? Before I move on to my other part, like it's a bit more complicated. What I'm going to like explain later, like the second part that I'm about to explain. Anyone? You cool? Cool then. Right. Just a sec. Yeah. So note, this is something that is very like important for you. Yeah. Look at the last part of this slide, which says that this house, as parent, would not send their child to private school. This house, as a parent, sorry for the grammatical error. This house, as a parent, would not send their child to a private school. Note, this debate is not about whether private school is good for the child or it's bad for the child. The priority of discussion within this debate has to take place from the lenses of what a parent wants for their child. In what world do they think that they can protect the child? Should they protect? Should they not protect? What is the moral obligation that a parent has? What it does not have? What is something that a parent looks forward to creating or nurturing their children to be? Does a parent want to create a classes distinction that a private school creates within the mind of a child? Do you think that's like a desirable outcome that comes out of this debate? If any of the side government, if any of these sides merely debate that private schools are bad for children, private schools are good for children, public schools are good, public schools are bad, we think that's a bad debate because they didn't really touch upon what the burden truly is. They just merely argued around what the fringes of this entire debate is going to be. But note the second last point that I put forward. In a lot of debates, specifically in like in international relations debate, and this was the reason why I took up international relation motion as an example for this debate, for this explanation, is people think that if USA is about to like invade, like is about to pursue like an aggressive regime change in Iran, and towards the end of the day, if USA is able to change Iran's regime, everything is good. That this is the outcome that government has to even care for. That whatever the outcome is, this is what I care about. That regime change is taking into place. Note that there are two distinct bases of argumentation within debating culture. Firstly is deontological or moral claim. Secondly is the utilitarian framework of claims, as it looks like. Some of you might be aware of what deontological and utilitarian basically means, but for people who don't know, let me like expound upon this a bit. Deontological says, this is Kant, who like Kant was a philosopher writer like who created the idea that the ends to the mean, like a means to an end, does not justify the act, which means that if I'm doing something and it's achieving a desirable result, is something should not be idealized, because my acts which result in those final outcomes matter way more than simply the results, which is to say that your every activity that you engage in result, like in receiving that outcome, is far greater because you have a moral obligation to adhere to it. Few examples could be like this. The reason why we don't use human shields in war, even though if you start if there is an asymmetrical war happening between US and Bangladesh realizes that, look, I cannot win this war on like logistical basis. I do not have anything that I can do so far. At this point in time, Bangladesh decides to use like US soldiers as human shields, puts them in front of their tanks and starts riding into US's territory or whatever the fuck that happens. The reason why these, even in asymmetrical wars or even in worst of situations, human beings do not engage in winning activities which are morally and humanly abhorrent, is because people think that toward the end result of certain activities are not defined by, like, the activity is not defined by the end result, but the activity is defined in what way do you pursue that activity. It means that your actions define the result, not just the result itself, which means that the moral considerations that you have within an activity is the necessary part of that debate. Does this become clear? Okay, cool, perfect. What utilitarian measure means is that, sure, that there are certain, okay, so if you want to like speak to, like, if I have to look, I'll take 10 seconds, like 2-3 minutes to speak philosophically, but yeah, the point here becomes that utilitarian framework tells you that what truly matters is what the end result is. Acts don't matter, because toward the end of the line, if your acts are inconsequential in nature, which means that if your activities are not giving you anything to relieve of the stress that you have or relieve you of the damages that you are suffering from, it's worthless to do so. Which means that if you're fighting a war against USA and you're not succeeding and you're continuously dying, people are getting killed, women are getting raped, and things along those several lines. Sorry for that, I didn't give a trigger warning. So the problem here becomes is that it says utilitarian framework will tell you that it's a bad war because you're not winning it, because you should do everything and anything to win that war. And this is what the distinction between utilitarian and deontological says. So why did I speak of this in this debate, in this actor motion discussion? Because, as I have said, an actor motion discussion is a selfish debate, which means one side could claim that all that matters for USA or all that matters for a parent is how the child towards the end is going to look like. Is he going to be a good man or a bad man? Is USA going to topple the regime in Iran or not in and of itself? The debate now becomes that the end means, like, are the end means have to be prioritized, or is there a moral calculus that you need to give two shits about when engaging in those activities? How does this become clear in this discussion about parent and their child? Which means that whenever a parent is sending their child to a private school, it's less about the idea that he's about to earn extensive amount of money, but more has to do with the idea that that the parent does not want that the notions of classism, that the notions of a classist society is that rich deserve more than poor children, to be ingrained as a moral value within the child, which means we think that as a parent, our moral obligation is to create a child who does not believe in a classist or elitist ideology. And this is the reason that we're not sending them to a private school, even if the private school provides them with far greater education than what a private school is going to be, because on our side of the house, we're making him a better child. Yeah. Is there a question? Daman, you're saying something? Okay. So does this become clear? Like, just because it's selfish does not mean you cannot take a moral obligation on you to debate that round. Like, it does not mean that utilitarian framework will always win. You can take up a moral claim to win this house, like an acted debate. Guys, like something like this is one of the complicated parts of this debate. I need to understand. Like, do you guys are you guys through with this?
Hello, sir. So can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking that if we can say like do that on selfish grounds, won't that be like if I say that I know that specific thing because I've been there? So won't that be like kind of name calling?
In the sense, could you give me an example? I didn't get this idea.
Like when I debate on certain motion in which it does not require me specifically to like tell my place of dwelling, but if I give an example of that and I say I know that because I am in that dwelling and I know it specifically because I faced it, won't that be kind of name calling?
Okay, so if you want to delve into the what the equity outcome of this argument could be, I mean, this people can say that this is a generalization argumentation, which says that individuals who are blacks will usually live in places which are bad or which are like not good enough. People could feel like offended by it. Like, equity violations can happen in an international tournament on these argumentation of lines. But in a debate, this argument is not wrong. But in a debate, this argument is not persuasive as well. Just because your argument is not persuasive does not mean that it's wrong. The point that your anecdotal experience or your personal experience is highly magnified and it's highly specific, that does not cover the general cases in which this debate will happen. So therefore, it's far easier for opposition to refute your claim by saying that, look, it might be your individual experience, but we're talking about the experience of a community at large and not about how you face it, because your personal experience could be drastically different from what an average citizen of that community feels. Did you get the idea?
Yes, I get it. Thank you.
Cool. Perfect. Any more questions before we move?
Sir, can you give an example of, a moral argument on the motion that this house is a parent who send its kid to a private school?
A moral argumentation that we should send them to a private school. Okay. So to a certain extent,
No,
a lot of
shouldn't.
just shouldn't send them to a private school. Cool. So like not sending kid to a private school is like far easier a moral argument to run than like saying that they should. Because as a parent, look, usually as a parent, you will have this debate on a middle class parent ground. Define from the government that this parent is not an individual who's specifically very rich or who's specifically very poor. He's a middle class individual. A middle class individual or a parent realizes the difference of what class society, like the amount of atrocities that a classist society could deal upon them, which means that a lack of opportunities, individuals feeling hateful towards each other, having a vengeful accountability towards every other individual that they see, which means that rich people looking down to poor people and poor people always realizing or questioning their own subsistence is something that a middle class parent will always realize, and it is something that deeply affects every parent. So in this world, we think that since a world with classes divisions is a bad world, and as a normal middle class parent, I have faced the consequences of a classist world, I think it's my moral obligation to not create or not to put my child into the same world which says that the only method of distinction between two individuals should arise out of a classist distinction or on the basis of how much money they have. So therefore, I think to create my child as a more a cohesive one or a more comforting one or a more human in nature, we think that it should know to respect every individual irrespective of their financial status. Does that answer your question? Does that make your argument?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So these are the
I
kinds
was
of
wondering
arguments.
if in the same motion, if we like bring up money that would be like a factual argument. No, that won't be a moral argument. Like if I say that I do not have like as a middle class parent, if we said the house is a middle class parent, that say it will be difficult, it will be a burden for on us to do that when we send it in a private school, then it will be like a factual argument, not a moral one.
Yeah, it will become a factual argumentation. Like you have to assume that this policy will follow, that there won't be any like matters of money that will get involved, but a matters of money in matters of moral obligation on you can be used. As I've explained earlier as well, in these debates, refrain from saying that you won't have enough money or you won't have enough political will, or the other parent who is very poor will never agree to sending the child to parent school. Don't run these argumentations which like don't argue the debate but the logistics of the motion.
But like, do the moral based arguments actually stand? Like, do they actually sway the debate in the on the other side?
Yes, exactly the point that I was about to talk to you about. So the point
But then it's
becomes,
like, doesn't it like, it's like kind of biased. Like morality is a like kind of base which shouldn't actually sway. That's what I'm saying. I mean,
cool. So the problem here becomes that a lot of adjudicators and a lot of debaters have this idea that look, utilitarian framework is my default understanding of how I look towards the world, which means that the outcomes of my actions determine who I am as a person and not the acts that I do. Here's the distinction that lies. As you rise within the ranks of debating, you'll realize that utilitarian debates are 1 in 90% of cases. It's true that utilitarian debates will win you almost every other debate because a normal adjudicator will always think that, look, what bullshit are you telling me about a moral obligation? If that child is able to study in a private school and has a better shot at getting into Harvard, then obviously it's correct to send him to a private school. Like, what argumentation is this? But the question then becomes within a debate as to how much you analyze this idea and how much you put effort into explaining that why this moral obligation will be a mental trauma or will be a mental stress or like will be a violation of personal principles for a parent to do so. It like if you want me to take a class like on explanation how you run moral principle argumentation, I can definitely run, but I would suggest like it's an entire new arena that you guys will understand what like principle argumentation specifically in moral claims look like. It's not that you can never win a moral claim debate. It's like it just takes a bit more analysis than just normally saying that, look, it's morally abhorrent for me. You also have to prove to me that the moral abhorrence that you're talking about, where does this stem from? What's the cause of this moral abhorrent? And this is the place wherein we bring about a middle class parent or a middle class individual. Because it's not factually untrue that a middle class individual never faces any kind of backlash or discrimination because of the financial status. We think that it's universal truth that every individual, because of its financial status, faces certain amount of discrimination. Even the richest of the richest will always have somebody who's always richer than them. So it's untrue that if opposition claims that, look, financial, like saying that there is a financial difference is a factual claim and you cannot make it. Does that answer your question?
yeah, kind of. Okay.
Cool. Like I like post GI, if you guys are still interested in like running, if understanding how moral claims work and how to make like deontological argumentation in a lot of debates and how to make nuanced like principle argumentation, we'll definitely have a class and I'll like explain how that works. But for now, I think like that's that. Cool. Anything in this section before we move on to another?
I just wanted to ask, like, out of these two approaches, the utilitarianism and the deontological, which one is more persuasive in nature? Like, the both depends on moral intuitive reasoning. So, like, out of them two, which one is more logical to make in a debate?
To be fair, I would suggest you to like run with utilitarian more. But the idea is that the reason why I told you is because a lot of debates don't have a utilitarian outcome in a lot of debates. Like as a parent in certain circumstances, there is nothing that you can say from opposition side, from government side, in this the parent would send their kid to a private school, that there is a utilitarian outcome to it. Because on your side of the house, this child will always be comparatively lesser educated, probably will be more empathetic in nature or have a more caring personality, but will always have a second class education compared to what he gets in a private school. So the utilitarian outcome will always be against your favor. So in such debates, you will always have to make a deontological argumentation. But if there is an option for you in a debate to choose either of the two, I would suggest to run with utilitarian outcome because it's far easier for it to be sold to adjudicators and for you to realize what the impacts of utilitarian argument is going to be. And I think like it's easier to win debates on utilitarian frameworks.
So, does it not depends on the adjudicator? Like it's totally moral reasoning, which is very subjective in nature. So it like depends how adjudicator sees the world.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. This depends upon how adjudicator sees the world. But if an adjudicator puts that world into its verdict by saying that, look, I don't think that this is a moral truth that exists, I think like that's a bad adjudicator, because adjudicators who have like sufficiently like experienced enough realize that if somebody is providing me a well look, in a lot of debates, impacts don't matter, outcomes don't matter if there is a hugely analyzed claim behind it. So usually what happens in moral claim debates is that you win by merely giving an extremely in-depth analysis of why this decision is truly founded or it's truly based in rationality, other than short-term benefits such as graduating from Harvard, but rather if you are an individual who have inculcated the values of being a less elitist person, we think that it helps you forming a long lasting interpersonal relationships in the longer term, and will give you a more fulfilling life for the longer 70 years of your time. So did you get the impact that I drove out of this deontological argumentation, that the amount of like the satisfaction of my life is going to be for 70 years far more than I have when I have a like elitist outlook to how my life looks like. So if on a good and analyzed argumentation from Gov, you can win from moral, but like if you have to choose between the two, I would still go utilitarian. Is there a question? Like, do you want to follow? Um, please.
Yeah, I got it. Right.
Oh, okay, fair. Let's move to next slide. Cool. So definition policies and fiat. This is something that you need to always care about. A lot of debates are set in high generality and debate there. Don't run away from it, right? So the earlier motion was the parent as like this house as a parent would not send their child to a private school, will not send their child to a private school is a highly general debate. Don't place this debate in a world wherein you say that, look, this debate happens in India, and as a normal average parent, I'm already below middle class, and therefore I cannot send my child to a private school. That's not how this specific debate is supposed to flow about. The debate has to be on principle argumentations, not or by setting them into a skewed world. Do not prefer that. But if not that, then what? What's the status quo that we by default assume whenever having a normal debate? It has to be somewhere in the middle ground. You don't claim it has to be a Western liberal democracy such as Canada, wherein you have extensive liberty to do everything, that you have the right to go ahead to go on to the streets as to engage in a public nude protest. But however, it's not an authoritarian as well, which means that like you're not debating in Russia or China, okay, like whatever that you're going to say or do is going to affect the morality of state, and probably there's a chance that you'll get fucked. But like this is not where the debate will happen. The debate will happen in a functional democracy, wherein your act of engaging in a public nudity parade will create certain backlash, but that backlash won't be like an authoritarian backlash, but would be say certain people taking up news channels and telling that, look, this is bad, this shouldn't happen, this is generating public disgust, and things along the similar lines. So it's a moderation of everything. A functional democracy may not have a real world example, but assume that it exists in an ideal world and debate there. I would suggest if unless and until it's not impossible, do not put a real life world as a debate set in a house. Don't do that. That creates a more space for opposition to say why you're wrong. Secondly, do not rush to extremes, as I've said already earlier. Like, do not place your debates, feminism debates in Saudi Arabia or trade debates in Luxembourg. Like, there's always one side winning by default since this debate is set there. A lot of debates will have a pathological case or an exception that you can always carve out. Don't always feel bad about like doing so, because in this house will legalize drugs debate, you can always say that we will prevent minors at all points in time from buying drugs. Even if minors end up engaging in drugs, we are fine by putting them into rehabilitation center and levy as less policy, as less punitive measures as we can, because we think that minors are incapable of making rational choices, such as they are incapable of making a rational choice to vote. This is a logical extension of that, and therefore we put them off from our case. So opposition cannot argue, look, minors will become drug addicts now. Correct? So these are the kinds of like exceptions or pathological exceptions which are universally true, can be put up to this debate. Secondly, this is very important in a lot of debates, because a lot of debates have some confusing wordings that exist, right? These confusing wordings looks like this house will shoot bin Laden. What does shoot bin Laden look like to you? Does it look like to you to taking a photo shoot of that individual? A lot of individuals make this debate to be like, yeah, sure, we'll shoot bin Laden. We'll go up like with professional photographers and have a professional photography session and create a magazine out of this. This is skewing the debate. This is how you get fucked up in a debate. Like, this is the easiest way for you to fall out without really arguing. So remain always true to the nature of debate. Do not run away from it. Secondly, do not put a time set in debate, which means that don't say this debate is happening in 1984, or since we're talking about a US diplomacy debate, okay, this debate is happening in Cold War. These are not the kinds of time set that you do from first gov. Don't do it. It's bad. You'll lose your case pretty easily. And don't debate special cases. A lot of debates will have certain unique cases which are extensively good. So like, what I personally would recommend is, when you're debating startup culture motions, don't say that my ideal of how I develop or how I imagine a startup culture to be or a startup to be is Facebook. That's an exceptional case if opposition can claim, or an extreme case because it has certain like cohesive conditions that this company grew into be such a big one. Argue regular debate, argue regular examples, argue Zomato, argue whatever startup that you see around yourself. Like, don't argue special cases or extreme cases. And last point, you always have the money and the political policy and the political will to pass the policy. Let no one convince you otherwise that you don't. Cool. Any questions on this? Cool. What the fuck? Like, this meeting is ending in 10 minutes again? Oh shit. Okay. So wait, I'll just like give you a brief view of what lies next. The next portion is going to be an argumentation portion. Being very honest, this is probably the best part. This is probably the best part of this entire debate, of this entire session, because this is something that I'll be engaging in great depths, explaining how argumentation works, what is the implication, how things will flow out, specifically giving you an insight, how to think in a debate, what outcome should you expect, what you should not expect, how do you create rebuttals towards the end of this debate, towards the end of the session. I'll also explain how to engage in responses, how to make your frame your responses, utilizing points of information, and every other jazz that flows out in a debate. I'll keep the next part of the session as short as I can. We have like 9 minutes to wrap up this one, and I hope you all will be there. But till then, let's start with argumentation. Good. Right. Notice the graph on this debate. So a lot of people will tell you, okay, what's an argument? Like, an argument is not an argument because you saw it on Facebook, or because somebody tells you that since the like, how do I say, the sky is blue, I'm happy because it's not raining. That's not an argument. Like, cool, that's an assertion. That does not prove anything, because there is no premise to it. There is no conclusion to it. There is no reasoning that why our mood and why the weather is connected in any way. The point here becomes that you have to identify what a debate argument truly looks like. And debate argument like has a lot of factors in it. Firstly, whenever you make an argument should be mutually exclusive, which means that whenever you are making certain argumentation, they should be exclusive to your own policy, which means that if this house will abolish patents in technological sector, and the arguments that the government is running that it causes increase in prices, we think that that's an inexclusive argument. What do I mean by that? Which means that patents and prices are two different sectors that exist, which means patents mean that exclusive control upon the product, and price means that exclusive control upon of what value that product is sold, which means that you do not have to abolish patents at all to regulate the prices, because in opposition's world you can always engage in aggressive regulatory, like price regulatory framework, create new legislation to regulate prices. Price is not a direct outcome, or price is not something that can only be curbed by abolishing patent. You look at the link between the two ideas, that his outcome of controlling prices is not dependent upon patent, because patent is not causing that price to increase. The reason why the prices are increasing, because there is no cap, or there is a lack of regulatory framework to control those prices. As soon as in opposition's world you put that into place, that gets solved, right? So the point remains that you have to make an exclusive argument that this thing that I'm claiming can only be solved in this motion by the government side. Opposition cannot claim the benefits of it. Remember that thing. Secondly, Every argument should have impacts. Arguments impact should be moral. Arguments impact could be tangible, such as utilitarian outcome. It does not matter. Note the gravity of what an impact looks like. Look out for impacts. Like, in short, what an impact says is that what is the change that you are thinking is going to happen, which means that the immediate impact of my argument is that if I ban or abolish patents, the prices will fall down. Even if I am not able to prove to you that what the link between the two are, but the impact of my argument is pretty clear because I see that the prices will go down and the market will become more, do I say, inclusive of individuals who are poor or who cannot afford such expensive technology in the first place. Correct? After seeing or after realizing that there exists an impact, the next obligation that you have upon yourself is to prove to me that is this outcome beneficial? Is this something that you're looking forward to? Because abolishing patents and reducing their prices has a significant impact upon what kind of look is just has a significant impact upon the, how do I say, upon the investors that invest in those technological firms to develop those technology. Because as soon as patents get resolved or patents gets abolished, every person can go ahead and manufacture the same Snapdragon processor chip. So what's incentive on parts of Snapdragon's investor to invest in Snapdragon? Because he can invest in any other person, because whoever, no matter who develops it, everybody can produce it and sell it, which means that technological innovation goes down. So you see that there is no benefit arising out of reducing prices because it is discouraging the existence of innovation and development. Does this become clear? Is this clear to you? Okay, I'm assuming it is. Cool. So at this point in time, you also have to see that first, there exists an impact of their argument. Second, is that impact beneficial? This technique becomes specifically beneficial to you if you are in a debate or if you are on the opposition side of the debate. Other person just merely claims, we're reducing prices. But does that matter? Is the price reduction something which is going to benefit the industry in the longer run? Note, nobody's claim that it's going to become a better world for poor individual is a win-win debate. It does not matter. You cannot say that now the world is going to become a better place for everybody. Is a good enough cost for me to abolish an entire industry or to fuck up the entire innovation prospect of that industry? Note the claim of both sides. One side might always seem better on the face of it, but ask, is their impact beneficial? Is it really doing something, or is this something that I'm always looking forward to? Second, the every argument that you make has twofold basis to it. Firstly, importance. Secondly, truth. Note, every argument that you are going to make in a debate will have two things in it. If in a debate I say the reason why I shouldn't send my child to a private school is because private schools are expensive, in the earlier debate, as I said, in the earlier debate, that this house as a parent will not send their child to a private school. The reason why I shouldn't, like, the government comes up and says that the reason why we don't want to send our child to a private school is because it's extensively expensive. And as a middle class parent, we think that there is a possibility of creating financial burdens in future. We don't think that this is something which is a reasonable outcome that we look forward to. It's going to degrade the mental health of the parent who is actually paying money for this. This is going to create burdens upon our houses, and this is going to create, like, because most education in contemporary times are not as investment, like, do not give you as much return according to the investment that you put in. So therefore, we think that putting money into private school is not right. Note, even though this argument in isolation or vacuum is a true argument, but since this debate is talking about the perspectives from a parent's ideal, this is not an argument which will fly in this debate. Because sure, you have a truth on your side, which is the lower part, like the red arrow or the lower red arrow. Sure, it's true, but it's not needed in this debate. It's not where this debate will work. On the opposition, if you say that the reason why I won't send them to is because there is a moral obligation on part of a parent to not make their kid more elitist kid, is the reason that we won't do it, is sure, is an important claim and a true claim. But the reason that it lacks analysis, that you cannot prove the truth validity of that argument since you have not analyzed it enough, that argument also becomes redundant. Because it's not just that you have to say that, look, since I've made the most important claim, I win this. You have to analyze that important claim by making it fairly clear or making it fairly true for every person to buy it, which includes your consistent analysis of how it goes. So the best argument that arises in these debates is an argument which says that, look, it's true, And it's also important, which means that you spend 3 minutes explaining why moral obligation is the most important part within this debate, and moral obligation shouldn't outdo the amount of like short-term benefits that you get by studying in a private school or by like riding a better car. Does that like does this part of this uh, does this part of this session make sense to you? Any questions before we like run up to change our like to re-log in into it again? Cool, perfect. So let's quit this. Abhinav, you here, right?
Yeah, I'm here.
Cool. Let's quit this one. We'll be back. Like let's rejoin immediately the same link for once and for the last time. I don't think that a lot of workshop is left, but yes. See you guys there.
Okay.